process indicates the setting coming into the bridging. I have to process through because I'm telling you right now, things are going to get more complicated, and the reason why they're going to become more complicated is because you're coming out of the dream of memory. To live the cycles that you guys have been in has always been the dream itself. And it's hard to believe where the body needs to understand what it needs to get out of is to come back into its memory of foundation. And if you're in the memories, coming into the memory of foundation. So when you process that, you automatically come into the observing, looking, watching, right? But you're not just going to be revealing things, you're going to be creating reality. And when you're creating reality, you're not consciously aware of what you're doing. Because it's much easier to see in a 3D that doesn't exist, that's in fabrication of itself, which is nothing of a story, that has no depicted system of balance of anything in travel. So it doesn't matter anyway, it's just a fantasy you're living. All right, okay? But the real you, okay, is actually in the metabed, playing the game, lying down, eyes closed, thinking, you're processing through that. So you really can't make mistakes in a dream, because you're not consciously aware of what you're doing in foundation. Now, when you come to foundation, it's much easier to see what's really going on, but it's more complicated. You have to protect yourself more now because you're coming into the actual setting of the 11 cycles of your system, which you've always been in, is the 12-dimensional foundations of the bridging that you have to process, form, and shape through. Now, it's true to understand how it's the rainbow bridge and the frost bridge in set position of operations. Okay? Truth is in position to come into your setting, but revealing and what you're creating is all through observation. So this is where you have to be cautiously aware of what you're doing through your database and what you're doing through your intel and what you're doing when you're doing everything in that position, when you come into that settings of travel. Especially when you come to the intent and influence. Either way, you're creating reality, okay? The frequency, okay, in that process of communication setting, get you in positions of balance, yes, but what you have to understand, it's the eyes, it's the perception that creates the reality of what you're seeing through your input and your output, a perception of your reality that you see in real time, okay? But remember, this is already done. The only difference is you're coming out of the creation of what you created through the dream, through the AI machine. This is a whole new concept for you to understand. So, in provision, from inside and outside line communications convergence. So adaptations and enforce get you in positions of what you're doing with your mind and your capacities and your flux and your time. Okay, it's extremely important what you guys are coming into, because everything you identify, you will create in front of your system. Okay, whatever you say, you'll create it right away. If you're not identifying, it's like, oh, I'm going to think it's top of my head, or I'm going to tell a joke. Well, it's not a joke, because that person picked up that joke, got that joke from frequency and energy that created a portal. You understand? So I want to make that very well clear what you guys are all coming into. Okay, not what you're going to come back to. You're just coming back to who you are. And that foundation puts you in that position. Now, the more you understand yourself, the more you come into observing, but nothing in the mind, nothing in concept, nothing energy, thought, or anything of action, everything emotion. Don't have that indication setting because we're coming into the 12 foundation of intel. It's the intel that's going to be open. The body has to be adjusted and aligned with itself so it understands what it is through its connection system, because the symbiote is going to see exactly where it is in its time frame, and it's going to see what it isn't, and it's going to go back to what it is. But the body won't be consciously aware until it gets positioned back online. Okay? So it's just a light switch and that's it. Continues on its path, knows exactly where it is in its 12 foundations. Now it just has to truly understand we're all connected to a 12 line dimension and how to go through the different levels from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. And set lines of 12. And set lines of travel. Okay? Process that in position of operation. Okay? All right. So automatically, you're just going to go in 0 grounds, 1 settings in high position, 2 lines of ground interference, 3 center positions of correlations in Fibonacci and ground centers, solar generation lights, 5 line rotations of balance, 6, convergence setting and throw pattern. Set lines at 7 over line connects and setting. I line sequence of panel. 8 lines of channels in position location to system. All through infinity. 9 line operation lines and set lines energy wash. Set position lines and calculation lines at 10. Set position lines and calculation lines 11. So 10 is lines of galactic energy core, which is your family. Circuit line communication 11, which is your solar system. 12 line convergence setting in divine. That puts imprints, line connection setting, longitude and latitude, a streaming of communication system, the force friction into the pattern of time frame all at once. Okay, that's what we're all coming into. So that's a lot of pyramids of astral projection yourself that you're going to go through indications. All right. But it's amazing how you see an information system. It rotates in its own calculation grounds. Right? Set position of 0 all the way in setting. So your foundations will automatically be, you'll be depicted in set lines. So you'll be installed in line operation and in 12 line foundation grounds automatically. Okay, so you no longer will be dreaming because you never were dreaming. Okay, that's the one thing you have to modify through, and the body has to be conscious aware what it says to its system, because the mind is going to be on its own. That's what it is. The mind's going to be on its own until it gets activated. So the mind's going to keep going, creates its own algorithm, creates its own position, creates its own programming, creates its own operation setting, creates its own simulation, creates its own game, creates its own polarities. It does what it does. It's in its own operation system, but the body won't be consciously aware of that. Okay? Only the mind that filtered setting the 12-dimensional system, that's going to be a projection of how you see things in that position or set lines of travel. Okay? So we have to understand how this all works through the bridging, and we're going to be all connected to one network. So you have to modify what you're doing. Don't process thinking, thoughts, or anything of action, emotion. Don't even think on top of your head. Don't get even in position, location, and setting in set positions. How you think about this person, how you think about that person, what I should say to this person, what I should say to that person. It doesn't matter because it's energy that's already traveled through. And all those 12 portals are going to be opened up from 0 to 12. And that's what it's going to be. All those portals open all at once. Okay? So we got 4 grounds of settings and positions of the panel, 4 set course centers and void line rotations. Let's ground the system and lines of calculation. Convert to settings. Okay, travels point graphs. Okay, so you got symbol lines of 0. So we're all coming to set position. You have 2 lines. 2, 1, 0. 0, 1, we start living into Earth point 024. Right away, it's set lines of travel. Okay, so we go through 3 grounds, 4 grounds of set position, and 5 are operation lines of direct lines of grounds in sequence in platitude. Okay? Okay. So the semblance on course centers the symbiote line operates the signal location of its voided cells. It sets lines communication that depicts the system and pyramid active lines and ground set location of Merkaba, tesseract, and tetrahedron. Okay, Merkaba, tesseract, and tetrahedron, which is the pyramid. And then we go to the foreground sequence, set lines of travel and direction. Okay. Okay, so that modifies the platforms. Now we indicate 45 flux, 2 centers of angles, 2 lines of setting shift line into V lines, sectors, vectors, and quadrants. Directing ground set as a sequence, panels, operation lines, and converts, set lines of travel, directing line communication with its energetic core. Sets lines of travel of communication. So it's getting very complicated how we see an information system all through setting from inside and outside through calculations. Outside position, inside lines of travel. So we convert the system lines of alphabetical line grounds, course calculation ground set calculations, dimension lines of set position of solar sail, process lines of portal line sequence location of stargates, operation line sequence. So it's going to be 3 stargates open. 1, 2, and 3, okay, which is a constellation Orion's belt. We start off at 3 and 12 line signals with humanity, only in 3 cycles. But everybody else is sent lines of travel. It's going to be a convert the system in 5 centers of channel operation lines set course centers that put you in operation line calculate screen lines adaptations that process in 2 lines of rotation into 1 line signals. So it processes 3, 4, 5, and 6 locations in calculation lines of grounds. Okay, so we convert this system, change the time frame and travel of communication. Look at that. Booyah. Okay, that's how it's all going to be set up, December 25th. All right, so I'm showing you the schematics, set up, location, setting, convert the system, 144 flux. Everything's going to be in the mind preceding cycles, hide lines, set location lines, bridging over lines. Now we rotate the grounds over line signals, travels point lines of graph, rainbow frost bridge, and portal of sequence and grounds in positions in frost bridge locations and security lines of communication lines of panel and operation stream. We work with inside location and travel calculation. Look at how powerful that is. Whoa. Okay. Lights go on, lights go off, lights go on, lights go off. All right. And then we flick it back. The frequency lines of ground since that plane is position of platforms and travel. Okay, so we work with the inline centers, which is the inner strip, the outer strip, the outer line realm, process lines of indication and lines of flux, voids lines of screens, and 42 location of lights, and platforms of E core centers. Triangulation over 1, triangulation over flux. Okay, ground centers of sequence, time frames, time locks, time calculations, time replacements, and time travel. Now, we indicate ground centers, line connection setting. We convert this to center operation lines, Fibonacci line routes, operating line centers of highways, and travel of communication graph line set correlation setting, pattern, and phase friction of time frame. The void itself. Say hello. There's the void. Okay? So we're going to be entering the void. Now, process 2 lines, 1 0, operation line 0, 1. So what we automate earth line, point line 0, and 2 point line centers of 4 lines of travel. So that it indicates everything inside of its operation system and travel calculations inside calculation. All right. But there's the face facade. Okay. So we're going to bypass everything to the phantom zone and go into the zero gravity, into the negative cycles. That's right. We're going to be living negative over lines of 0. The bodies are going to be converted to setting overdraft. Everybody else, the operatives and units and the activators, will be in checks and balances and savings. Now, directing ground centers that put you in position of processing in direct lines of ground communication system, everybody is going to be into their foundational lines where they left off in their consciousness. Now, this comes into their age category. Okay. So the age category correlates set lines of travel, direct lines of link. They process the indication setting of flux. 3 centers of measure, 2 centers of pi. Indicate process 2 lines, 3 centers of travel, 4 lines of signatures. That way, core to set core centers and direct lines of umbrella and ether lines of core and travel. Indicate ground centers of sequence. Panel operation 1, panel operation 3, 6 lines, and set lines of 4, set lines of travel communication. Converting ground centers, high operation lines. Pattern operation lines into construct, directing information system. Panel operation lines, 3 centers of travel, 4 centers of measure, 5 centers of scale of communication. Operation line ground, set lines of sequence, plotted 2 line operation, crop circles, detach, a separation line ground centers, mine operation line sequence, platforms of communication lines of set travel. Sets convergence line ground centers, triangulation over flux, indicates centers. Go to the convergence system, A, B lines of C, C lines of D, equals lines of A positions lines of A. Set coordinates on divots, davits, information lines of cells. Operation sequence, panel operation grounds, information bits, davits over templates and tablets, 42 line rotations, and flux over screen adaptation of flux. Okay, so there's a lot going on in set lines of travel. Work with inside lines, change it upside down, information system and calculation. Okay. All right. So I'm just showing you exactly what's going to happen on December 25th, so you get a better understanding. And processing this is what you are in set lines of travel. That's it. Wire signatures of core, circuit lines, directing ground center, calculate, modify DOS, iOS, IPA, and position lines of travel. Okay, walking signature cores, location with cloud. All right, so let's get in position lines of center cloud, iCloud, and eCloud. Center operation lines of 1, brackets over 3 centers. Now that's 2 false narratives, process lines, open line signals, outline, inline triangulation, box frame, flux over 1, in time lock, 3 centers, 6 over measure, 9 over scale, 12 signals, and 24 line rotations, 48 rotation line grounds, 72 lines of 70 communication lines, computer 1 rotation, into 144 flux and travel calculation. Okay, it's all direct lines to form an equation. Okay, so we take the truth narratives, the 3 centers of calculation, the 3 grounds of sequence, the platitudes, the operation lines of setting. Now we synchronize lines. We set 3 lines of indication grounds, 2 centers of measure, indicates flux, times center, times scale, indicate position of 2 line centers of satellites and modem, operation line sequence and travel. Now we convert the system, 1/3 graph and 1 set lines of travel calculation. Okay. Now the timeline opens all calculation grounds. Now we synchronize this high center location of 3 lines of weather, indicate position of 4 line sequence, correlation setting in 12 lines of rotation, indicate ground centers and position of pyramid activation. Setting line ground centers, 42 longitude, latitude, high signals, location setting, position of 45 angles and travel. Process that, position lines of calculation grounds. Now we change the schematics over screen, schematics over pi, schematics over line, dimension line sail, all line communication, holograph line, rotation lines of center. Set sequence panels. Indicate grounds, signal lines of ground communication. Converting 8, rotation lines signals. Process inline rotations into plasmesium and force centered angles. Process line indicates lines, equal line and location lines of polarity. Process and position lines, templates, tablets, offline signals, inside line rotation, travels court lines and line condition setting, in process line direct line grounds, in location of solar sight lines of travel. Sets operation inside calculations, in directions, inside line lines, and high set lines of communication. Indicate lines of flux, process lines of travel, process line indicates lines of calculation. Very complicated stuff through a drawing. So when you guys get out of the box frames, this is where you come into your schematics and set lines of 12 foundation or 24 lines of signal. There's a lot of activity going here in set lines of calculations. All right, so we got solar screen, metric meters over lines, secured lines of pi, securities and perimeters over line signals and set lines of travel. Process lines 1 over line cycle. Correlate communication lines of T1 receptor line goal line frames and set lines of communication center of the dot line operation signal. Sets convergence 1 grounds, set sequence, gold line 3 centers of travel calculation. Indicate ground centers, triangulation over lines into crystalline grids and line rotation lines of surface. Sets operation line grounds, platitude, fortitude, longitude, latitude. Set operation, set sequence, set panels, set calculation ground, set position. Circuitry lines, ground centers, calculation lines, calculation ground lines, half line, set location, half pipe. Operation grounds, signal lines of grounds, in-line operation signals, and location setting, and a roll graph screen in correlation system, and the cosmos and direct lines of link. Okay, so we go with the box screen, 3 centers of measure, 4 signatures, 0 gravity, 0.2 over 6 over 1. Triangulation box and center operation. Now we have 42 lines, line connection setting, that's 45,000 line measure scale, 45,000 line measure operation, and 45,000 line communication convergence. In direct operation sequence, process sit position location all through travel at pyramid activation lines and webbing. Webbing comes in set lines of travel, indirect lines of link, a panel operation screen. Very complicated stuff, isn't it? So like I said, your schematics and foundations, we're going to go into the decimal points. Okay, so now, as we go in the center line, we change the graph interference. Now we moditude the line centers, a moderation line and line rotations and 45 angles in travel communication. Okay, we change the timeline sinks, calculation grounds into webbing over lines and rotation centers. Now we 42 lines of blue. We have 4 signals over 3, 3 signals over 4 equals 7. 7 lines of 12 signals. 12 operation lines of panels in operation sequence, south wind, east wind, north wind. Operation line centers in 3 grounds of sequence and triangulation. Consolidarities, triangulation on constellation line, ground centers and line position, all levels of processing, indirect lines in pyramid activation, fortitude, and longitude line condition setting. Convert this system, operation lines, tango foxtrot, location setting. Okay? All right, so we convert the angles all through set of operation metrics, solar scales of calculation grounds. Okay, convert the system to calculation grounds, inside line condition setting. Okay, so we surface is set lines of travel, 2 finger point lines of graph, set lines of signatures. 3 centers, 4 centers of scale. Rotate the system, okay, 4 time angles. It says convergence over 3, 2, and position of 3 into 1. Operation lines, course centers, in position all the levels, 3 cent calc, 12 centers of measure, 24, 48, 72 computer lines into 144 flux, 0 gravity, 0 center, 0 operation. It's all done through equation. All right. Foundation, you automatically come out of snow graph interference. Your process is in position at 3-dimensional line condition setting when it has a ground line centers. That only indicates position of 1 grounds, 1 graph, 1 triangulation, 1 box, 1 question, and percentage in set calculation grounds. 99.99999 signals and 99 operation line something like communication conversion system off the setting. That's a lot of dreaming, guys. And 24 trillion frames per second per square. Calculate and modify 50 hours in frequency. Of course, centers and cents on the dollar. Triangulation over flux, process lines of indicates the setting, operation lines of sequence. Now, what you guys created was this three-dimensional line, rotation lines of floaters that have no indication of what they're doing, and 42 line condition setting in projections over pi, over travel. Okay? So, getting connected to that set position location settings, it's not 99%. Okay, it's 999,900 line, position line, and operation line, signal location setting is 01. Sequence lines, triangulation box, 7/7 line condition to 12 measure. Okay, 24 center operation into constellations, Orion's belt, and 5 signature grounds into 5 elements of space-time. Okay? All right. So I'm just getting you guys in foundation grounds. Graphs, calculation, ground interference into quantum flux. Then we go into nanoflux. So quantum flux, nanoflux, cyberflux, simile flux, and identity flux. And then we go into capacitor, and then we go into body capacitor, all through technology. You have to go through the percentage of the brain capacity of 4 centers of measure and 5 centers of scale. Just the brain alone. Okay, the mind's always existing in all formation lines. It's its own consciousness going here, it's its conscious going here, it's always expanding, it's on set position, it's all operation line connections going everywhere in that position here, there, not there, anywhere in line position, I need to travel. It's always existing in itself, right? So I'm just helping you guys identify what you're coming in position levels, how you have to metric, meters, your scales, and okay? So you're telling the atmospheres of existing. Your platitude, your teleportation, your telegraphing, your teleweaving, your telecalculation grounds into solar sails of travel. Okay, you go into the atmosphere line, travels in point line graph, answering patterns, process lines, energy and line course centers, existing information system into all calculation lines and position at all levels, betting your settings, 42 line ground center location setting, 98,000 line scale, which is the Earth in sequence, process over 2 signature lines of 1, take away 1 is 0. 0 process line directing over 2 lines of flux equals lines 0, 1. Okay, that's where we're all going to be, 0, 1. All right, so 0, 1 puts all position lines of travel. So you have 0, 1 positions, 1 out arrow, 3 centers of calculation out signals, and lines of ground communication convergence. Okay, outline signals, platitude line centers, line course centers, and line condition elongating 3 centers into all sets of course. Okay, bending space. 3 signatures over lines across, directing inside, outside line condition setting, converting center of 0 lines, operation lines of 1, and set lines of travel. Sets convergence, operation lines, and 42 lights of screen location. Round and round she goes to the clocking of foundation. Clocking centers of 0, clocking centers of powers, and clocking centers of atmosphere location setting convergence. 3 panels, 3 ground set locations of past, present, and future. Signature lines, operation line signals, platitude operation lines of travel, 42 line centers, and 42 lights, 42 line rotations into ground centers and travel of compilation system. Okay? Signature lines of time reactor. So the time reactor is a particle line accelerator. It's 3 centers of travel. Again, molecules of 3 centers of calculations lines, atom rotations, molecules, protons, electrons inside the center of operation, coordinate through travel and center calculation lines. Now, the 12 line signature lines position of programming into the foundations of all calculation system is going to be in the center operation lines of sequence. That's how it's going to be set up. Okay? How this is going to be set up, lines of grounds, guys, the circulation rotation system has to have a parameter location of security lines of panels. 12 foundation lines of 1, set position of 0 lines of 1 operation. So we coordinate the calculation of alphabetical line centers. Okay, so you're going to be in 26,000 letters over centers. That's 0 calculation system. We go into lines of levels, travels, directions, line condition setting, 42 line out, change conversion setting, all through solar sail. Travel. Okay? December 25th. Right there. Okay? That's how it's going to be set up. All right, so balancing that out is sure you out how to modify your systems all through travel calculation grounds. This helps you to identify everything that's going inside the lines of operation in your system and calculations. All right, but there you go. That's how it's all going to be set up. Okay? Hooah! Then it's just going to be rotating on its own system all through travel in seconds, minutes, hours, and frame. And the 12 foundations of your clockings and your settings of your bridgings and set calculation. All right, that's it. We're done. I don't want to do any more because of the high process line condition particles and accelerated line communication, the thermal lines direct locations offline signal. So I got to reconfigure the system back in calculation ground centers. But I'll see you guys in DQ. Bye.